for Crooked Tree Art Center. Our Vice President Christy would be here, but she is at her daughter's wedding reception in Kalamazoo, Libya. Please join us the next 2 Saturdays. We'll have talks for the next 2. They'll be at 11 though instead of 10. There'll still be coffee and the @ symbol. Next weekend it's the Artist of Bitter and Beauty, which is the exhibit up here, and the weekend after that is the Artist of Winter Wit, which is the exhibit downstairs. And now we're happy to present my Crooked Tree colleague Brianne Munch to tell us about her recent experiences in Italy, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to what she has to clay. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brianne Munch.
Wow, there's so many of you. I love it. I appreciate y'all coming today, and I'm sure you're wondering why I was gone for 2 months, and this is why. I was doing what I love doing best, which is my ceramic work, which I brought some here with me today. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But to get us started, hi, I'm Brianne Munch. For those of you who don't know, I am not only a ceramic artist, but I am also an educator locally. I teach at the Northwestern Michigan College as their adjunct for ceramics. And then I'm also here at Crooked Tree, as Brian mentioned, as the guest experience associate. And how I got started with ceramics, was a long, long time ago. I was lucky enough in my elementary years to have a wonderful teacher who brought ceramics into our world in the hand building way. Although we had kick wheels, those we definitely did not use in a very professional sense. So once I graduated from there, I went to Pathfinder School. That's where I was at doing that. And then once I got to high school, I explored ceramics more. I took like 3 years of ceramics, became the studio assistant there, and really dove into the wheel as well with the help of my instructor at high school. Once I got into college, I decided that not only was I going to do my sculpture work, which was mostly fabric and beeswax sculptures, I was also going to do my ceramic work on the side, mainly focused in wheel again, with the help of my professor, Billy Mayer, who was a real mentor to me. And then I also was his studio assistant, which was quite a treat. So once I got out of college, I took a major break from all art. I was exhausted. But so once the pandemic hit, it kind of gave me that turning point to then dive back into something that I really love the most, which, again, ceramic. So I actually started out as an extended education student at NMC and was able to use the studio space to work and create. And that was a wonderful opportunity to be able to do that for about, I would say like 3 semesters or so. And to be able to work at NMC and use their kilns and the materials and work alongside other students was really quite wonderful and inspiring. So being able to just create like 80 pieces plus a semester was really helpful towards my practice, but also towards the greater goal of kind of why we're here today. And I also, for a long time, or at least like a year and a half or so, I was working under some local artists such as Ben Mayer and Laura Brown, just as their production assistant or helping in their galleries, which is also another reason why I love working here at Crooked Tree. The gallery end is such a wonderful experience as an artist to be able to see the back end of everything and just feel like you have a little bit more of a well-rounded sense of what goes into all and everything that we do as artists. And then once I started teaching at the Northport Art Association up in Northport, Michigan, that's where I met my colleague, Orrin Hesterman, and that's how I found out about La Meridiana. So once I met him and I realized that this was a real place, because we go on the internet and we see these things and we're like, I mean, that looks pretty cool and all, but is it real? Once I spoke with Oren about it, I definitely was like, I've got to go there. I have to commit to this. A little bit about my work before I went to La Meridiana. I love my past work a lot, and I think I've grown a lot in my past work. And I love color, and I love painting on my work most of the time. But where my work really shows most is just the whole form. And I just felt like it wasn't getting to a place where it needed to be. So that's part of why the program at La Meridiana, which is the ensemble program, 2 months is why I was there for about 8 weeks. And it really just took my work to a whole new level. And as much as I love my past work, there's always room to grow. And that's a main component of why I went to La Meridiana in the first place. There's a beautiful place. So I went, and part of getting into this particular program, I did have to apply for it. So I had to send in some info about myself, all the normal application for courses or whatnot. But then it was like about a month or so I heard from them, and they're like, "You're in." I'm like, "Cool, awesome." And I never plan in advance for anything, so saying yes to something 8 months in advance was pretty new for me. So I had to commit to that pretty early, and I'm so glad I did. But in anticipation for coming there, it was like better than I could have ever imagined. But La Meridiana was founded in 1981 by their founder, Pietro Meridiana. And he was an engineer at first, but then turned potter while he was studying in England. And so he spent many years in England learning and working through leach pottery. And then he decided to buy this old Tuscan farmhouse that was, gosh, built in the 17th century. And it did not look like that. It definitely was a bit more run down, needed a little bit of love, needed a little bit of something, but Pietro is a dreamer. And he was like, I'm going to make pottery school. So that was his dream, and we just get to live in it. And that is the main building. So you see like the front door. I'm standing kind of up on a hill where I took this photo. And behind me is actually part of the old farm that they tore down that they're now going to make into more housing and studios. So that's going to be really fantastic. This is the drive up to La Meridiana, and the light just hits different there, so there was never a bad photo. It's great for photographers and painters and everything in between. This little purple photo down there was a view from my apartment building, which was next to the school. And of course, just more views from the school in that lower right-hand corner. And the main mission of La Meridiana is to create a sense of community, but not just any community, but community in pottery and in ceramics. And then of course the education component of that, not only do they have amazing instructors there, but they also bring in other ceramicists from all over the world to teach workshops and classes. So it's really quite a special experience when, if you're someone that's like, oh my gosh, I always wanted to learn from that person, they will most likely be there. And you get to do either like a 2-week workshop are available, there's month-long. I of course did 2 months, and then there's another program that's actually happening right now. It's still the ensemble program, but it's 3 months long. They do a little bit more with porcelain and whatnot. I'll get into that. And then of course Italian culture is the main part of it too. I'll go there, so lovely. And just a few photos. I also am an analog film photographer, so I took about 12 rolls of film while I was there, both in black and white and color. And these are just some shots from it. This is our studio space. That's our wedging table. Make sure to wedge out the place so that it's all good to go when you want to work with it. That's part of the play process. Down in this corner, there's two of my friends in our kiln room. And then, yeah, we would have coffee breaks and all this beautiful stuff. And then more in the studio space. The studio space had so much light, which is just so special. And it's such a peaceful work environment for sure. All right, and this is my group. I love my group. I had no idea what to go into when I was going to get there. A lot of what I'd seen before was like mixed groups, but no one really my age bracket. So I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna be the youngest one there, and that's totally fine. I'm here to focus and work anyway. But then it ended up that we really were all the same age. I'm 28 to 36 was kind of the middle range, and then one of the girls was 19, and Oren was our reigning leader at 73. So he's a great man. He definitely became one of the girls. But so that's Oren, me, that's Michelle, she's from Norway. Chelsea is right next to me, she's from New York. Matilda down below from Australia. Patricia is from Mexico. Naomi, although lives in New York, is from Peru. And then Taylor is from the Los Angeles area. So most of us were from the United States, but then half of us were from many different corners of the world. So definitely made some lifelong friends there, and we still talk. So we all had a really good time. And then, of course, our very amazing instructors. So Franco Rampi was our head instructor. Not only is he an amazing potter, but he's also an amazing sculptor. He makes these really, really amazing slab sculptures that you hang on the wall, and they just have lots of texture and they're very organic, and just uses some of the shapes and lines that I was really inspired by. So he's great. He's still on the green glasses. He didn't like his photos taken, so I did it sparingly. But next to him is Sophia. She was not only our course assistant, she was so much more than that. She was, or is, she is not only like helping the instructor, but also helps with like any of the clay making, the glazes, running all the kilns. She is a Jane of all trades, so she was very important to all of us. And then not pictured, but still equally as important was Ev, and Ev was our glaze extraordinaire. And it is just amazing what that woman knows, and I learned so much in regards to what you can do with glazes, how they're made, and just like the caliber in which you can use them is just phenomenal. She was a wealth of knowledge, and I hope to go back and maybe take one of her glaze courses. And sorry, part of our daily routine, of course, was food. So we would not only be working from 9 to 5, 5 days a week, or sorry, 9 to 6 most days. We also would have coffee breaks, and we had lunches. And so in the morning, we'd always be waiting for that coffee break, which was very important. And then we'd have a 3-course lunch, which was incredible. Probably the best food I had was at the school. And we would have, homemade gnocchi, and we would have risotto and soups, and it was all the good stuff you'd have in Italian wintertime, which is nothing like our wintertime, but still cold. And then we have our second coffee break later in the day, and that's always much needed too. But it was always just so lovely, because I know I forget to take breaks, and it's definitely a good way to chop that up and make sure that taking our time, not all about the clay, and then but I think it really helped make that community part of it too. Because then when we're all at our wheel, we're just going at it. we're not talking to each other. We're not doing anything. I mean, maybe once in a while, but we were all very focused people, so very ambitious. And it was nice to create that community in. So they broke up the weeks in, we would do a different type of form every week, plus other things like the kiln work, etc. So in the first week, of course, we got acquainted with our studio, we got acquainted with our workspace. That was the studio, we have our wedging table, and then we all had little cubicles. There were 8 of us total, so it was a little cramped, but not too bad. It was nice to have our own wheel with our own shelves, all that good stuff. And unlimited play is amazing. Out there, you know how great that is. We got to just kind of play, and we got to really experiment and not let having limited amounts limit what we can do. So while we're on this first week, we just did cylinders. So all cylinders all the time, which is the basis of all forms, in my opinion. And he took what we already knew and told us to forget it. And then we had to learn completely new things, which was why I went. So keeping an open mind. I was like, okay, here we go. And I will say I did not know I had a tricep until this class. And yeah, it was quite something. So because we always forget it's a full body thing, at least I do. And I try to remind my own students that it's a full body thing, but it'd be a full body thing. So yeah, it was really great to be able to just mix it up in that way, because I've been doing the same thing for so long, and I know I've been teaching my students only what I know. So it's nice to learn something from someone else for once. And during that week too, we also learned handles, and we learned how to do jugs. So kind of making those flips at the top of things. So this was kind of one of the jugs I made during that week. And then making some mugs too. So the whole purpose of anything they were making was actually mostly for test tiles. So a lot of these are just prototypes. Once we got those all accomplished that week, then in the next week, they actually put them through the firing. So they have to get to bone dry before we put them through a bisque firing, which is the very first firing that things go through. We always had to have everything done by Saturday morning, or else it would not go in the firing on Monday. So that was the goal. And then in week 2, we worked on bowls and then more prototypes. So we had our first kiln firing. We always put Friday mornings, Christmas Day. So that is the best part of the whole week, is getting to see how everything turned out. And if what you think was going to look cool is actually going to look cool. Sometimes they didn't. And then with the bowls, it, again, completely different technique. And being able to pull those walls more evenly was really quite special and important to at least changing what I was doing before to making the work 10 times better. We noticed that within like the first week and a half, all of our work was just completely different than what we were doing. So a lot like in the second photo below is all of our test tiles. So not only were we doing the cylinders, but we also put what are called slips over top of those cylinders. And the slip is essentially like liquidized clay with a few other components in there. And then you can add color to them. So we did have a cobalt blue slip, and then there was a black slip that had some iron in it, all that good stuff. And then of course white slip too. Although our clay is a very dark gray color, as you can see in that second photo, it does not turn out that way. And like a give and take. You kind of wish it turns out that way, but when it comes to the glazes, you really do want it to be lighter so that those colors show really nicely. The darker the clay, the harder it is for those brighter colors. And then we also learned that week how to put on a throne foot. So usually if you're going to have a bottom on your piece, you would trim it with a carving tool. But I was much more interested in throwing a foot on there, and as I'll discuss later, it became very much part of my final project. But that was just the second week, and testing more good stuff. And then at week 3, we did lids and bottles. And with that, at the beginning of the week, he would, both Franco and Sophia would draw on the board what he was going to demo that day. We'd have demos like almost twice a day, depending on how much we asked or how much he had to teach us. So when we were doing that, he'd go through the line of, all right, I'm going to show you this one, we're going to go to B, and so on and so forth. And also that week, he made us do cylinders again. So with that, we had to do more clay, and we just had to make as many as possible. And with that sort of repetition, you're really getting a good sense of how you're pulling the clay, but how well you can pull the clay. So it would be, I had to work the grams, which is hard. But we had like 800 grams, and then I would try for, no, I'm going to do 1,200 grams. And my 1,200 would be shorter than my 800. And I was like, well, that just can't be. So I went back to the 800, and I could pull it taller, much taller than any of the, like the more amounts of clay. So that to me was such a big breaking point of being like, okay, so I don't need that much clay to actually make something big. So that's a huge component, and that's something that definitely changed my work too during that time. Even when I get back into my work here, he gave us an assignment. He said that I had to go back to cylinders, so I'm going to have to do that again, but it's all good practice. And with the bottles too, I rarely kept anything, so I probably made over 100 some odd pieces while I was there, but I didn't keep any of them, really. So we would chop into all of them just to see what they looked like and get to really know it, because honestly, I second guessed myself all the time. I was like, this can't be that balanced. The walls are probably heavy on bottom, thin on top, and then you cut into it and you're like, oh, dang it, that was actually a really good one. And then you start to make it again. So that was a really successful week. And then in week 4, we did cups and saucers. And then glazing our bottles from the week before. These cups and saucers, I didn't know I was gonna love so much. I think those are my favorite pieces. I definitely tried when they came in the mail. They just being able to make something so precise and take the time to actually measure it out and put one thing inside of another, and it's just like perfection. It's very satisfying. So I did that week, and I also learned how to throw off the hump, which is when you take a huge amount of clay, you put it on the wheel, and then you start from the top and you just kind of section out and make until you're at a hump, which was much easier than I thought it was going to be. So that's good. And although I worked on plates that week, plates are one of my favorite things to make. So I decided to just make a little bit of them, and then Sophia pushed me to really work on jars again. So I decided to go back and make jars, and that's what on the top row of that last photo was my little jar tests, and some of them are not, I lied. They're not here, that's today, they're home. But those are some of my favorites, and I didn't expect to like them at all, because I was like, I don't want to do that today. And then in week 5, we did teapots. And according to some potters, the teapot is what is like the creme de la creme. It is if you can make a teapot, you've made it. I had not made one yet, so I was like, I'm going to really commit to this. They're really time consuming, and because not only do you have the handle, which is something I'm not a huge fan of in general, but you also have a spout and you have a lid, and that lid has to fit perfectly, or at least well enough. And that was definitely something that pushed me out of my comfort zone, but it was definitely very important. Um, and then also that week, Orin and I were on kiln duty, so each week, two of us would be loading and unloading all the kilns and helping with the glaze firings as well. So Orin and I did that, and you see in that first photo, we packed it real tight. So it was, you can get as much in a fist firing, but it's when you get to the glaze firing that things can't touch. So it's nice to be able to pack in a lot, but you also got a lot for, and this all fit in the glaze firing. That's always fun, and it's really cool to learn how to pack kilns a little bit differently too, because I've been taught many different ways, but it's cool to see another way in which you can really get a lot in there. And the pieces are sturdier than you think they are. So good to be careful, but they'll be fine. But no, with the teapots though, I really loved actually successfully making 3 of them. And although they were really hard, I tested out different designs with each of them. I brought one here today. And I love it. and you're welcome to come look at all this stuff and after my presentation, but it even had like a filter inside of it, which is important to have. And being a tea drinker myself, it's really fun to kind of drink out of something that you made. So the teapots were an experience. I think it took me at least like 3.5 days to complete 3 teapots. So they were definitely a lot. But then one of the biggest things I was really looking forward to was throwing large forms. Because although it's fun to just throw down 10 pounds of clay and be like, I can hopefully make something out of this. It's nice to have a little bit more of a technique to it and really put something together that is going to hold up. Because the more pounds you have, sometimes it can just go haywire a lot for it easily. So we would do our large forms in a 2-part way, which means that I would throw one huge cylinder. That one was about 2 to 3 pounds. And then I'd make another 2 to 3 pound cylinder and put them on top of each other. And then you have to throw them together. And once you have that kind of like, in a sense, they're half thrown, so you're not trying to get all this weight up from the very start. So it was really a nice technique to learn to just not make it hard on yourself, because honestly, throwing 10 pounds or more is something that takes a lot out of you and something that I used to just save to the end of my throwing day, because I'm like, well, good, it'll just make me good, tired, and then I can go to bed. But now so my first few were quite thick, so I definitely would need to practice a little bit more, but it was definitely exciting to just be like, wow, this is so big, I have to stand up. So that was really fun for me. And then week 6.
Hi everybody, happy Saturday, thanks for being here.
Then week 6, we started our personal projects. So what that meant was, after learning all that we could learn, and then some, we had to choose kind of what we wanted to do and what we wanted to create as a project. I decided that I loved yellow, so the yellow glazes that they had were quite exceptional, and they're a drier glaze, which gives it that sort of matte look, which I was obsessed with. So once I was able to really understand that yellow glaze, I wanted my whole project in it. And I also decided that I wanted them to be large. I didn't care. I was like, they're going to get home. And each one needed to have handles, a lid, and a thrown foot. So I wanted to take all the hardest components of what we were learning and make a whole collection. So I have about 9 of them, and they're my pride and joy. But in that week, that very first week, I was just playing with shape. And I am not a huge fan of drawing things out, but for this project I did draw a few shapes that I'd like to do. I was very inspired by the Romantic period and that type of pottery. So definitely took a lot of shapes from that time period, but made them a little bit more modern, a little bit more rustic. And really played around with making kind of fun knobs on the lids and giving them some character, and not having it just rely on the just the shape itself. Okay. And then same thing with week 7. I realized in week 7 though, there's like a lot of the first pieces, which would be kind of like these stouter ones here. Then I was like, those aren't my favorite. And they were kind of like the ugly stepsisters in my opinion, but I was like, I want taller, I want like these really regal looking vessels. So I kind of took a little turn on what I was making and started pulling some bigger shapes, but also getting in some more fun handles, also making more height with lids. And that's when I kind of started making the shapes I really liked. And making them as tall as I possibly could without making Franco mad. That was important too, because they had to fit in the kiln somehow. I wasn't gonna be that person. But also during that week 7, we had lots of time to just practice. So I went back to a lot of the smaller things like cups and just chugging that along. And then I realized while I was glazing how extensive I made my glazing. So although it looks like, I mean, there's a lot of layers to these, I used a technique that I'd put one layer of glaze over the piece, and then I'd put paraffin wax to create those angular designs. And then I'd glaze them again, and then I'd scratch them, and then I'd fill the scratches with temoku, which is a really nice dark metallic glaze, depending on the temoku that you have. And then you prayed. They ended up turning out really nice, but it was a lot of work. So they would give us like 3.5, 4 hours to glaze, and it just wasn't enough sometimes. So that was one thing that was hard. That's why I had like extensive plans for each of them. So I definitely drew those out, and then I knew what I put on later too, which is also a really helpful thing to do for yourself. So learned a lot there, had a lot of growth in planning ahead. And then in week 8, we had our final firings, and we just really celebrate and are like, great, everything made it. And then it was like, good thing I have a final project. So once everything came out of the kiln, like in this last one, we actually had our exhibition in Tesaldo Alto. And so Tesaldo is a town that Meridiana was in, but we were about 20 minutes out. But Tesaldo Alto is the old town. So that is the old city that's above the new city. And so it's this really beautiful city on the hill. And that's where our exhibition was. And we had this lovely little space, and all of us had our own section. And that's where all these staff could be seen. It was a really special time with not only the staff, but also our instructors and founders and all that good stuff, and whoever else wandered in from the street and saw them. So, and so then, although I have some work here, a lot of it I can send back home. But my work after Meridiana definitely is very yellow, but it is also just something I'm so proud of. This is some of it, some of the jars. Then I've got my pumpkin saucers here, and some of the bottles. They range in size and shapes, but I still stand that I have the saucers that my favorite. They are my absolute favorite thing. And all the teapots work, which is fun. That's good. And yeah, so lots of just different things. I think this program really pushed me to not only have to make these things, but want to make these things. And I know one of my main goals is I want to, and I'm going to like live. And I can definitely say I do now. I will definitely say that will be in my future work for sure, along with the drone feeds and getting my candles to better. Although I wish I could say it's like I've done it. There's still so much growing to do. And I'm really excited to continue with what I can do now and just make what I have done so much better. Um, Linda?
You showed your journal where you were mapping out your blazes and stuff. Did you take copious notes through the whole thing, or?
Yes, I meant to set that out. It's in my purse now. I do have all my notes. They are here, but they're just downstairs at the moment. I can show you those later. But yeah, I took extensive notes the whole time. And because even during the demos, I know myself, if I don't write down, I'm not going to remember. So I definitely wrote down everything I could because Franco was just such a wealth of knowledge, and so was Sophia. They're both amazing potters. So anything that we could get from them, we wrote it down. But yeah, whether it was planning or getting notes for how to do things so that I can replicate them later, definitely was, all of us kept notebooks. It was very important. Any other questions?
I'm curious if there's like a style of throwing, like there's a dialect or a style of clothing. Like, I guess I thought, I mean, I don't know, maybe books are to be clear, but I'm curious about what was so different from what you've been taught and learned that you're there.
Well, I would say, yes, there's definitely different styles of throwing, and I would say to every potter is taught something different. And with my throwing in particular, I would say, stylistically, I definitely like more round shapes. So when I throw, I definitely keep a rounder shape in mind. Whereas there's definitely those more modern straight edge styles too. I just don't like it. So I definitely keep to the more classic look of pottery. But that's just me. And although I can throw very modern too, it's not me. It's not what I enjoy. So although I could replicate, I could say confidently, I would say I can maybe replicate almost anything, but it's more fun when you can make it your own. I don't know if that answers your question completely, but I would say yes.
Think about like you were taught a whole different way. And I was just curious about the physicality. It's like, do you hold your hands?
Yes.
Like,
So
yes,
yes, it is all about how my hands are. What I was doing with my hands prior to being there. So when you're throwing, you have to get the piece centered first on the wheel. That's like the most important part. And the way you hold your hands, like what I was doing before, was vastly different to what I was doing there. And it's just like the way in which you're holding the sides, or you're holding the top of the clay when you're throwing it. And the way they were teaching us is you held it all from the side, and you predominantly used your thumbs on top to keep kind of that all in place. But prior to that, I was kind of like holding my hands like this. But like when we were centering, we were doing like that. And I know not everyone could have seen that online, and I apologize, but you have to be here. But essentially, it really was a lot of like hand positioning, and before I felt like I was using way more tools than I needed to, meaning like anything that was made from wood, silicone, metal, things that I can use to help make the shapes the way they are. I was definitely using a lot less of them, which is nice, so I don't need to buy so many. It made a way for us to be able to really feel the clay. Because before, if I was pulling up the sides. If you guys have ever watched any throwing videos, you have to pull those walls up with both your hands. They kind of have to mirror each other as you're going up. And before I was using a sponge on the outside to kind of help pull those walls because I thought it gave me more grip. It did not. So like learning through Franco and like not ever using that ever again, it definitely made a huge difference because you can feel the clay, and that's what's most important, is being able to feel the clay. Yes.
Can I ask you about the clay itself? The clay, so different, is there a different texture to the clay you had there? Did you learn anything about clay preparation that was different than what you learned here?
I didn't learn anything so much about the clay preparation, but the clay that they had was a stoneware from France. So we have a lot of stonewares here too. But this one in particular had a lot of plasticity to it, which is due to like the bentonite that they put in. And that's what they add after they buy it. So they buy this clay, it's great and whatever, but then they add to it. Which I know some studios do around here, or any potter maybe like takes the clay but makes it their own. But this stoneware in particular, they added a little bit more grog, which is kind of like a sand texture that they put in, and it helps with the stability of the stoneware. And this stoneware, although it like tore, luckily my hands have healed. They were really torn up, my family can attest. I sent them photos, and it's like my whole hand on the side here was just, I had to throw through it. But that was definitely due to the grog in it. So I would say I personally like more smooth clay. But after a while, your hands just get used to it. Because in the end, you're like, well, this holds up really nicely, so it's kind of a give and take there. But no, the clay they had was really nice. I did very much enjoy it. Just like how much you could get out of it was really important. Good question, thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, one.
Yes, guys.
Congratulations on the beautiful surfaces.
Thank you.
Are you going to be able to use any of the glaze recipes that you learned over there, or is it all like weird Italian ingredients?
No. It's all ingredients we can have. There are also recipes that I have as well. I can remake them at some point. I would have to get access to a cone 10 kiln. Cone 10 is the higher point which you can fire something. That's about 2,400 degrees. A lot of what I'm firing at is cone 6, which is around like 1,800 degrees or so. And then it can go as low as like, or not as low, but low for like 04 would be how you fire the disc. That's, I'll say like 1,600, give or take. But with these glazes in particular, I would need to have access to a higher firing kiln, which I don't at the moment. But it's definitely something I personally want in the future when I do get a kiln, which I hope at some point to get. But right now, I'll probably go back to what I showed you before, kind of those glazes of my previous work, which is a lot brighter, and I love the bright colors too. But getting this yellow again, I probably won't for a little while, but I have in my back pocket for later.
I've got a recipe for you.
You do?
Yeah.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Anyone else? Yes.
So, early on, before you made the decision to go with, it felt like you had a sense of yearning, like there was something more that you needed, couldn't quite put your hands on, you knew there was something more. So you've been here, you had this wonderful experience. Is there a new sense of yearning?
Always. As a potter, I always believe that there's always more to grow. There's always more to learn because there's so many of us out there that are doing amazing things, and it's really great to learn from them. I would say from here, although I love teaching at the college level and I love teaching here, I definitely want to go do residencies as well, which will give me the time and space to really focus on work a little bit more. But yeah, it just depends. I've also thought about grad school or a bunch of different things, but I definitely want to continue in ceramics for sure. So there's no stopping anytime soon, that's for sure. This has kept the momentum going. So can't stay stagnant, gotta keep learning.
So were you offered any kind of scholarships to help with your tuition for this class?
I was not. They do now have a scholarship fund, but when I had applied, they did not. That's definitely something they want to have. They want to have for future students, but I have saved enough to be able to go, so I was very blessed to be able to have that in my back pocket for myself. But yeah, it is. I mean, I would say for the amount of time that you're there, it's worth every penny. It's about 10 grand to go there for this particular program. Other programs, they range. I would say typically the other 2-week to a month programs are like, I would say 1,300 to 2,000, just really depends. But keep in mind too, that's like including the accommodations, it's including food, and it's also well run. It was just an amazing experience. I don't regret any penny. It was definitely worth it.
First thing, I did not pay that kind of money for the food that you showed on there. The second thing, I was asking, I'm not familiar with the building, but the two pots on top of each other, two cylinders on top of each other. I don't remember that, or I don't think I've ever done it. It would seem to me that it would be really tough from a technical standpoint because the clay would have to be extremely similar between the two, I think, true? And then how far along, if it moves toward green, do you do that?
So you don't even let them dry at all. So you throw them both at the same time, the two cylinders. So when you're throwing two parts, you just have to throw them so they're the same thickness about, and then you do have to make sure that the diameter of the lip is the same on both. And then you're kind of putting them together like a puzzle piece. So the bottom one is shaped like a triangle, and then the top one is an inverted triangle. And then when you put it on top of each other, they're like a very snug fit, or should be. You pray, you hope. You just hope you measured, and that's important.
That doesn't sound easy.
I would say the least easy part of it would be actually flipping it over on top of the other one, and then you have to cut it off the bat. The bat is something that you can throw on. It's either made of like masonite, plastic, etc., wood. But you have to like cut it off of that, and then you have to take that off, and then you have to like cut the rim a bit more, and then you have to like put that seam together by like pushing upwards and downwards with your hands, and then you're still just hoping that you put it on there straight. So you kind of want a friend to help sometimes, but if you don't have a friend, you just have to be like, well, I hope that's on there. But I think the main part of it is just patience and focus and just getting it going. And I know like I was really looking forward to large forms. Some of the other girls were like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, but it's really fun. Do it. I would say it's tedious and it looks harder than it is. That's coming from me, so. Anyone else? Cool. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys coming out and listening to me jabber on about my really fun experience in Italy. But if you have any other questions, I'm going to be here hanging about. You're also welcome to come look at the pieces. We also have some great exhibits up in general here at Cricket Tree. I'm also selling a few pieces, so if you're interested in that too, come talk to me. But otherwise, thank you again. You guys are also great.